Right, okay, so once we've got our track mixed down and we've got everything how we want it to sit, everything sounds cool, it's always good just to go over everything again and just to make sure everything's in the right place. So one of the things we've used in this is we've used a few bus effects. Now bus effects are great because you can use a combination of reverbs and delays on one channel and just send it using a send, and you can send everything that you've got going on in your track that you want to go through them effects just to go straight to it, so that it sort of keeps everything clean because you're using the same effects all the way through. Like I tend to use a small reverb and a large reverb and a couple of delays, which when they're both playing together they bounce together alternately, and this just sort of gives you another element of cleanliness to your track, because if you're using reverbs and delays from all your plugins, they're all different sizes, and if they all start overlaying each other and things, you get all sorts of like harmonic distortion, and you're taking up like space in the track that you don't need. So by just using these two reverbs and effects, like using a couple, everything sort of gels together a lot better and sounds a lot cleaner. So we're just making sure that everything's right on the track. So here we go, we've got bus 4 sending here, so we just check what bus 4 is. Now I haven't actually got a bus 4 going on in my track, so whatever's happened along the mixing process or making the track, I've deleted something that's not getting used anymore, so we just need to make sure that everything's right. So this is for an effects clap that we've got here. I'll just play that and we'll see what it's supposed to be. Take that one off, there we go. So that's just that clap. Okay, so that looks like it was supposed to go to a reverb, which is actually on bus 2. So we just put that onto bus 2. There we go, and make sure that that's in the right place, and if we check it again, that's a lot better. So just by going over your track, making sure everything's right, these little things, because these are all tweaks you've made throughout making your track. And if you forget them out at the end when it comes to bouncing it, then you're missing things out of your track. So just by having a little scope out on your mixer and things, just make sure everything's right. We've got all the effects that we need on there. If there's things that we aren't using, get rid of them. There's no point having things on there which you don't need, because again, if you open the project at a later date, you're just going to confuse yourself. So like, we don't need that plugin on there, so we'll get rid of it. Now a lot of my effects are scattered because I've removed things out of the chain and things like that, but just make sure you don't move any that have got automation on them. Like this one, we've got automation on the Megasaw. Now if we were to move this off that channel onto another one, it would just completely screw up the automation and it won't work. So leave them in places and just make sure everything's clean and tidy. Okay, so again, once your mixer's all nice and clean and tidy and everything's in the right place, just check your automation. Now I've not got a lot of automation going on in this track because it's quite sort of cutty and choppy, but as you can see, my automation is very clean. So I've got my nice curve down there. Just get rid of those dots that we don't need, and if you can't find your automation page, just press the A button on your keyboard and it'll be like that. Otherwise you can just click up here on automation. Okay, so make sure that's all clean, you've got your curves right and everything, and it's like cooking, I suppose. If you clean as you go, this part of the project's a lot easier for you, and everything's just nice and tidy and cool. So all we need to do now is just double check that everything's not too loud on the master. So if you've got anything on there, like I've got a limiter, you don't want anything on there, and we need to make sure we've got like 3 to 6 dB headroom on the mix there for your mastering engineer to play with. So if we just flick through the track, we can see if the mix is too loud or too quiet, or if it's just right. To sit and listen to the whole track and just keep an eye on your meter and make sure it doesn't peak too high. So you're in between this, like you've got 3 in between there with it basically. That's your sort of best range to go for. But yeah, listen to the whole mix while you're doing this. But the good thing you've got is while we've been mixing down into buses, if that is too loud or too quiet, all we do is select the 4 bus channels and just turn them up and down, which is great because you're not having to select all your levels and adjust all your levels at once. You can just bring these 4 channels up and down, and that'll adjust the volume of your whole track. So you can see just by moving them 4, we've adjusted the level to how we want it, and everything's sat in the right range. So all there is left to do now is to set the markers and then bounce that down into a 24-bit WAV, so then you can either use that for mastering yourself or send that off to a mastering engineer. So if you've not been using the project markers, which are at the start and the end of your track like these, what I tend to do is just put a loop region of the whole section that I want to bounce, making sure that I've left enough at the end for the tail of whatever end. There we go. And then make sure it starts bang on at the start. There we go. And then what that does is that'll only bounce the selection that you've highlighted. Otherwise, if you don't do this, you'll end up bouncing your track and you'll end up with all this silence on the end if you've left your markers over there, which is not cool because we've done that enough times and wondered why something takes too long to bounce. So just make sure there's nothing on your master again, and then we go down to the bounce button at the bottom of the channel. Now I always use the one at the bottom of the channel because when I use the Logic's file and bounce, what it tends to do is just bounce the 2 automatic outputs which Logic's preset to use, whereas on our sound card we use outputs 9 and 10 because of all the gear and everything we've got wired in there. So if we just do that, it bounces the channels that you've used as your master in the project. Okay, so we'll make sure we go to where we want to save it and we'll give it a name. So this one's the Squats Brain Freeze. Oops. And it's going to be unmastered, so I just put UM and it's in 24-bit, so UM24. Okay, so we make sure that PCM's selected and we're onto a WAV or an AF, depending on what your master engineer or yourself wants to use. 24-bit, we leave the sample rate at 44100. Interleaved, that means it's a joint, it's like a joint file, so you've got your left and right in one file. Otherwise, if you've got split, you're going to have 2 files, one will be left, one will be right, and you don't really need to do that. So just use interleaved, no dither. Dither's like when a hairdresser just like snips into the top of your hair and just chops it a little bit to make it sort of look not too uniform, not too straight, but it sort of just gives it that like finish on your sound. But we don't do that yet, so leave that on none. Make sure it's not normalised either, because that's just going to get rid of the headroom that we put in there. And then all that we do then is just press bounce. And then after we've bounced it, what that'll do is save into your bounces folder, and then we can import that into your next project, where we can finish it off and we can master the track.